the Microsoft team really needs to validate that the resellers, again, that aren't employees of Microsoft, are saying the correct things and representing the correct way. So it's a little bit of a sales compliance type use case.
Hi, friends. Welcome to the Sales Enablement Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Paul. That was Josh Kamrath. Josh is the CEO at Bongo. And in our conversation, Josh and I get into a topic that I've been exploring a lot here recently on this show, namely, what's the role of training versus practice in upskilling sellers? It seems like we keep sort of training sellers, and I say that sort of in air quotes, without giving them the space, the time, or even necessarily the tools to actually implement and achieve a level of mastery with new skills. So we dive into how Bongo enables managers and sellers to more accurately assess sales readiness, especially in the critical human-centered skills, human-centered selling skills, not product knowledge and so on. So we're talking about the ability to connect, to deploy your curiosity and your understanding to help your buyer make progress throughout their buying journey and move closer to making a decision. So we get into all of this and much, much more. But before we get to Josh, I want to remind you to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. So let's jump into it. Josh, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure to have you. So tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
Sure. So my name is Josh Kamrath. I'm the CEO of Bongo. So we are a skills validation and sales enablement tool that helps have learners or employees put knowledge into action.
And, okay. So explain how you do that.
Sure. So through structured video assignments paired with AI-powered feedback and coaching mechanisms, we put people through an experiential exercise, have them demonstrate skills or competencies. So it could be something as simple as overcoming objections. Could be more abstract or complex skills like leadership qualities or characteristics, or having a difficult conversation with a boss or employee or sales prospect. Mm-hmm. So there's one part, the assessment component driven through video. Then the second part is the feedback and coaching elements that help that person improve on whatever they're being evaluated on.
All right. So assessments, everybody sort of tends to think like paper assessments and so on. But so tell us how you're using the video to assess somebody's skills in a certain area, let's say essentially a new hire or something. I presume you could seems like an interesting use case to use this for hiring.
Yeah. So hiring is a use case. I would say there's certainly a lot more prolific usage with just trying to improve how people communicate or articulate knowledge. So whether that's in a sales setting, which is probably most common, sure. Could also be customer service, customer success, partnership enablement are all use cases. But, how you use video to do that is, video is really the vehicle or the mechanism that captures authentic representation of that skill or that knowledge. And how it's done is through in what's called an asynchronous format. So where everyone's working on their own time, as opposed to like right. Zoom or Teams, which is synchronous. And, there's effectively a handful of workflows. So 4 different workflows that are effectively tweaks on how learners or employees get video content into the system. And again, that's all driven asynchronously. And once that video or that skill validation is in our tool, there's AI, machine learning, and natural language processing that happens behind the scenes that give automated feedback. So both things like delivery style, so speaking rate, are they using filler words, those aspects, as well as content. So is that user or employee saying the right thing? Are they articulating or representing themselves or representing the product accurately? And the tool will automatically identify that and give both that user, so the employee, the feedback, as well as typically a subject matter expert or a manager, that feedback as well.
Okay. So yeah, just getting into the nitty gritty. So, uh, okay, salesperson handling objections you mentioned. So they log into Bongo and they get like a scenario,
Mm-hmm.
and so then they have to verbalize on video what their response would be, to this particular objection.
Yep.
And is it prompted or is it just they're reading it off the screen?
It could be either. Like a typical use case for that example would be that would probably be more of a video stimulus.
Okay, so they're watching a video.
Yeah, the user clicks show question, a video stimulus pops up of, I love your product, but the price is too high. And then that learner or that user, that salesperson, they need to overcome that objection. So hopefully they're talking about, hey, it's not just about price, it's about value and about solving a problem and about level of service and the aspects that hopefully some sales enablement or marketers equipped that salesperson to help them overcome that objection.
Right. So at the same time, the sales enablement team will have fed into Bongo, hey, here's our playbook for answering objections of this particular type. So it's sitting there processing as you said, sort of in real time while somebody's doing this and saying, we're trying to avoid the word, XYZ because that sounds defensive or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So in some cases, it's, improving how they communicate, like avoiding XYZ. In some cases, it's more of a compliance where it's, for like Microsoft, for instance, so we have, not, I guess we do have for more of a leadership development, Microsoft employees, but we also have all of the resellers of Microsoft products. And so they're not employees of Microsoft. Sure. They're people reselling Office or SharePoint or Azure. Right. And the Microsoft team really needs to validate that the resellers, again, that aren't employees of Microsoft, are saying the correct things and representing the product the correct way. So it's a little bit of a sales compliance type use case. So certainly still around enablement and yeah, exactly. So it's a great use case, and throwing 23,000 not employees but VARs against those question sets is hugely scalable and gives them the assurances and kind of warm and fuzzies, if you will, that all of that investment in marketing and sales enablement was actually worth the time and the money and the effort.
Yeah, because it seems like a fair amount of work on the sort of front end of this implementation for enablement or whomever to come up with what are the frameworks we're going to train on and what are our standards and whether recording video prompts or just scripted. So how? I mean,
I would actually. We actually take it one further with, the sales enablement teams and marketing teams or just sales leadership. A lot of times hopefully they're already doing these things to equip their sales force with the skills or the knowledge that's needed. What Bongo provides is that validation piece that that knowledge was transferred and that those salespeople in this case can apply that knowledge in a real world context. But I would say additionally, and this is something that's been an evolution of our product. In the past, those administrators, people authoring this assessment, have had to basically manually plug in the keywords or phrases, like the important key phrases. So we actually have a different feature set that's, I think we released it in April or May earlier this year. So it's had a number of months to be hardened and kind of tested out in the wild. But what we call it phrase gen. And what it effectively is you can, as a manager or sales enablement professional, submit a piece of source material. So it might be something like battle cards.
Sure.
And our tool, through machine learning and natural language processing, can automatically identify thematically where you're doing, like, what's the direction those battle cards are trying to go? Like, what's the main theme it's trying to convey?
Mm-hmm.
And then the algorithm actually runs again and identifies keywords or phrases that support that direction. So it effectively takes the heavy lifting out of the equation in terms of having those enablement people or the sales managers or whoever's authoring assessment to have to like think about what are the key phrases. It just makes a recommendation of, hey, algorithmically, this is what we think is most important in terms of what's communicated by the sales professional.
Right. Interesting. Now, does anybody, do you integrate like CRM so they can see, okay, that the machine learning is prodding people in the right direction because you're getting the outcomes you want?
Yes. So we don't integrate with CRMs, but we integrate with most learning tools. So both through deep integration, which, where Bongo's kind of like the Intel inside and powers that kind of experience through other tools like Thought Industries or D2L. And then we also have a SCORM integration. So any tool that has SCORM capability, a user can basically embed our assessment into those products. And then it's a natural, just through the learning path or the user engagement path, those people are going to be evaluated in a more authentic manner through Bongo. And then, I guess depending on how that organization, what they want to use that data for, we actually have analytics or data APIs where they can, push that data into other products like a CRM.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not as, it's not like turnkey if, productized yet.
Well, so there's, one of the, I think, emerging trends, so to speak, in enablement is this idea of practice.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
I like to say it. I think we've trained people a lot, but at this point, my favorite metaphor now is where it's like pouring liquid into a full cup. It just overflows and nothing's retained, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So the idea is, well, how do we make people actually help them adopt new behaviors and become effective with those? So it seems like this platform's really, and I've had other conversations with other people recently, more focused on this idea of practice, not necessarily role play per se, though obviously part of that role play is practice, but just the ability to be able to practice and get some sort of feedback. Yeah,
no, I would absolutely agree with that. And, we actually had I would say kind of to elaborate on that, really a couple different things. So one, with that thought process of practicing, that's a huge element of what Bongo can facilitate is both a mechanism to practice, but also an environment that's a safe space and a judgmental free zone. We've all, or at least, those of us that are salespeople, that's, what I started my career in was sales. Whenever there's a boss or like a big brother, right, monitoring a sales conversation, there's in the back of your head mindset of like, oh, I don't want to screw up. And that's a self-fulfilling prophecy a lot of the times.
Oh yeah, there's a term for it. It's called explicit monitoring theory.
Okay, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So what Bongo facilitates, or one of the abilities that Bongo can facilitate is that environment to practice in a safe space and improve on whatever it is you're practicing on, and get feedback automatically through auto analysis. And the second item that I'd kind of emphasize is we actually had a university, so Cal State Fullerton, up in LA area,
Orange County.
In Orange County. So they actually did a pretty major peer reviewed, so like an actual research project around both Bongo and our auto analysis feature set. And really two core findings from that project. One was when auto analysis was available, people ended up practicing a little over 360% more. So basically, people are when this is available, people ended up practicing 3.5 times more compared to not having it available.
Or
and that led, go ahead.
Compared to having somebody provide the feedback.
Yeah, having a human provide feedback, exactly.
So they
right.
rather practice on their own as opposed to with the boss. Yeah.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And but that also led to really positive learning outcomes, right? People ended up, lo and behold, if you practice more, you are better at what you're practicing. So that was a huge, very positive correlation. But the other really cool thing was, or finding from that project, and there were a number of different findings, but one that really speaks to me or stands out is there was massive correlation. The more complex the subject matter, the more, if Bongo was used, the higher knowledge retention took place. So, basically, so like evaluating things, that are simple or straightforward, like what's 2 + 2,
right,
is a super basic. There's pretty little correlation with using Bongo leads to better outcomes. But if you're asking a person an abstract question or kind of an out of the box question where they have to apply critical thinking, there's substantial correlation with whatever was trying to be taught or measured. If it's done through Bongo in a more complicated question set, there was or subject, there was a higher correlation to knowledge retention, right? So people would ask difficult, challenging questions, difficult subject matter. So again, to maybe boil it back down, 2 + 2 is super simple. But why Microsoft Azure is better than AWS, that's a pretty complicated and technically challenging question. Mm-hmm. And if asked, through Bongo, it very much measured and encouraged the behavior of people fluidly articulating whatever that knowledge was, right? And that was just a random Microsoft Azure, compared to AWS, but we all have competitors, right? So whatever your product is compared to your competitor's products, why is your product better? Why should I care? That again is an abstract question, and when asked sales teams or customer success teams that kind of question, especially when they're equipped with the correct answers, but by enablements, if they're being measured through Bongo, again, very, very high correlation with positive outcomes
because they practice more.
Exactly, because they're practicing, right? And they're being measured in an authentic manner, right? It's not a multiple choice type question set where they can guess. You can't really lie through a video recording, or it's much, much harder to. So they're being measured in a more authentic manner, and especially authentic. And I guess when I say authentic, it's can they take that knowledge and actually apply it in a real world context, right? Not just can they remember something, but can they actually use it at their job?
Right.
That's what Bongo really strives towards.
Got it. So you talk about you integrate with a couple of leading LMSs and so on. So they'll have salesperson will go through self-paced training of some sort. Yeah. Why AWS is better than Azure or vice versa. And then part of the assignment is, okay, now we're going to test what you've retained or what you've learned and retained. And can you talk about it in a comfortable, knowledgeable way?
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly correct. Right. And we're so it's not like this is incredibly new technology. We've been at it for 10 years, a little over 10 years. So I would say, we've lots of lessons learned and millions of users impacted. But, I would say the other element that really sets us aside or apart is, we really want to have or take a democratized approach, right? So making it, we're really going after lots of users and really wide applicability, as opposed to, and affordable, as opposed to, some of these other tools or some of our competitors where they're extremely expensive and they're only being able to be purchased by, super high margin SaaS companies. No, that's our ICP is software or SaaS, but I guess my point's, we're trying to take the more of a affordable approach, that's accessible to all users. And I think that's one of the reasons that some of our use cases, and, I've a little bit been peppering, this into the conversation, in that it's not, for us, it's not just sales, right? It's customer success, it's support, it's, any role at an organization that is customer facing. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And my philosophy, and certainly Bongo's, is sales, especially the best organizations, sales doesn't always happen by the salesperson, right? Yeah. A lot of selling and a lot of customers understanding where value is derived comes from the onboarding conversation, right? Or it comes from the support team or the customer success team. Exactly. It's not just the people earning commission.
Yeah. Well, most mature SaaS companies, the lion's share of the revenue is coming from success anyway. So
exactly.
Yeah. Right? So it's hugely important that they be armed with, this level of facility for practicing, because they're not getting they have sort of the same business development task in many cases that sales does, but without oftentimes a lot of the training and development that sales has.
Exactly. Right. And that's the crazy fact is, organizations spend the lion's share of training on salespeople, right? And it can make sense because that's where the revenue is coming from. But there's a path towards it being logically defensible, right? You're right. I don't think it necessarily makes sense, and I think that's really my point, is that it's. Some of these other sales enablement solutions are prohibitively expensive, so they're only being considered or purchased for outbound sales. And that's just, in my opinion, a huge opportunity wasted, in that, like we were just talking about, especially at more mature organizations, the lion's share of revenues coming from customer success, not from net new logo sales.
Yeah, but I was, as you talked about earlier, the thing that sort of struck me you sort of ran through a list of things was, first and foremost, this is about Bongo. It seems like to me is about, in this technology, is improving communications. Right? So, sales is communications methodology, right? It's just one way you're communicating to the buyer. Success is, support is, anybody customer facing, or even internally, right? Leadership, for sure. You referenced leadership before, is I would imagine, some companies must be using this to say, okay, how do we train sales leaders on how to have better coaching conversations? How do we train leaders in general on how to have better, quote unquote, difficult conversations?
No, those are, I mentioned Microsoft. That's where we started, right? So it wasn't the sales. It wasn't even close to sales people. It was leadership training. Now, a much larger contract and deal or footprint now with the sales organization at Microsoft. But same thing with ServiceNow is another great example. Started in leadership, and substantial expansion into customer success and how people that are representing what ServiceNow does, are they able to clearly articulate that? Right. And in turn, that's a tangential sales activity. So it's not even sales people that are being evaluated there. Another cool use case that comes to mind is that's certainly not a technology company, but Chick-fil-A. Right. So that it's, they have delicious chicken sandwiches, but they also have a reputation for being very polite and very clear and articulate communicators. So what's it called? So it's management training or leadership development, but they're evaluating constructive criticism, right? So that's another, it's not even having a difficult conversation. It's just how do you, give constructive criticism to an employee,
Right.
and that's being measured and evaluated and improved on through Bongo.
Yeah, I was just thinking, is how do you? I can imagine at some point somebody said, "Okay, yeah, love this asynchronous nature of this,
Mm-hmm.
but we want synchronous, right? We want two-way." I mean, is that part of the big vision, or is it, this is a distinct enough,
Yeah.
area? Because I always think about, some of the tools like conversational intelligence,
Mm-hmm.
which is dozens and dozens of companies doing that these days.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think the sellers practice. They don't use it to practice the same way. Right? They're going
Mm-hmm.
to practice on the next customer, but they're not using it for preparation. Anyway, it's just not to
Yeah.
meander off on a different path, but it's
Totally. So actually, Bongo has synchronous capability too. It's not conversational intelligence, and that again, our approach is purpose built like learning activities, right? Having that person improve on something, and maybe our product will evolve more towards that direction if that's what our customers ultimately ask for. But people typically gravitate more towards Bongo because it's purpose built for learning and for improving, and like you said earlier, practicing. And although there's synchronous activity that can be captured, we want the feedback to be constructive and positive, and just that feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it's a little bit my opinion that conversational intelligence tools a little bit more gravitate towards like Big Brother and
Yes.
there can be, there's certainly, and don't get me wrong, there is opportunity for learning and improvement, but it's just, like I was saying earlier, and you had a good phrase for it. It's when you're being monitored on a high stakes, high consequence conversation, there's no reason to put more stress into that equation. I'd rather, and our users would rather, practice and prepare for that stressful, high stakes conversation, and that's really where Bongo's focused.
Yeah, well, I think the idea with this idea with explicit monitoring theory is that people become overly self-conscious about everything they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And
exactly.
perfect exemplification is maybe there's Shaquille O'Neal shooting free throws, right?
Yeah.
A zillion thoughts in his mind from a bazillion different people about how he should do it, and he had a hard time just hitting the rim, right?
Yeah.
The guy who was supremely talented, but it was all in his head, largely, I contend. Or pro golfers, or there's all sorts of people at the top of their professions that just have too much running around in their minds, as opposed to, hey, this is something I've done 100 times on my own. I'm not even really thinking about that at this point. And and it's interesting questions. Some people would say the answer is role play, but I think there's value in role play. I think where there isn't is it's never really authentic.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really going back to the judgmental free zone, or the facilitation of practice. That's really where, again, our users are deriving a lot of value, in that it's an environment that encourages practice. So more practice happens in that judgmental free zone. And because more practice is happening, it's more muscle memory, if you will. Right.
Yeah,
so it's,
I agree.
There's never going to be a silver bullet, but really that's been our philosophy, is encouraging practice, creating, mechanisms or workflows to have automated feedback take place. So it's like we were saying, it's not judgy. It's encouraging of that behavior.
We're comfortable having machines judge us as opposed to people judge us.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly correct.
Well, that makes sense to a certain degree, right? I mean, we don't really care whether a machine likes us or not.
Yeah,
But
it's hard to hurt their feelings.
it's hard, or hard to have your feelings hurt by a machine.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they're not judging.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you ought to build that into the feedback.
For sure.
Yeah. Are you sure you want to do it that way? Yeah, all very interesting because I again, as I talked about earlier, I think, God, we've got enough training for the most part out there in the sales world.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sure, new people coming on board, they need to be trained and so on. But if you've got somebody who's been in sales for 5-10 years, and I've had this conversation with another guest on my show who contended, he said, yeah, stop training.
Yeah.
Train people. That's not going to get any better. Helping them retain what they've learned, helping them put what they've learned into practice.
Yep.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And really, with that example, what I would argue is, yeah, seasoned professionals probably don't need salesmanship training. They don't, they already are familiar with situational fluency or how to build rapport, and so those are some basics.
On that, by the way, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and maybe some need that training, but then it could evolve, or the training that would be needed is an evolution of, just like again with our ICP being more software or technology companies, those organizations are constantly coming out with new features or new marketing campaigns, and that's where there's I think like a little bit of a philosophical difference in terms of what training is. So again, time and a place for salesmanship type training, and certainly Bongo is being leveraged for that massively. But there's a kind of it's a stepping stone to training on new functionality and new features, and being able to communicate, not just what the buttons are, but why the engineering team invested in this new feature set and why it's valuable to the constituency, right? Like the end users. So that's something that never is done, right? It's always an evolution at every company. And, that's really an area where Bongo can and is massively helping at organizations, is, just that kind of, the industry has like micro learning and fancy terms for it. But at the end of the day, it's, a few minutes here and there, both learning that new functionality or learning that new messaging, and then validating that it was learned, so that the powers that be, the sales managers, can check, feel a little better, a little more confident that the money that they just invested to create all those materials was like worth it.
Yeah, you're using air quotes, worth it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, a whole different conversation about, are we training the right things?
Mm-hmm.
See, I contend we're not.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I agree.
I think we do, but we miss a big chunk of it, because I sort of divide a seller into two parts. Yeah, one is what you know. The other part is who you are.
Mm-hmm.
The fact is, who you are influences how the buyer hears what you know.
Mm-hmm.
And we train people to death on knowledge, right? Product information, customers, process, blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
And comparatively very little training about, just how to be a human being, how to build rapport. People learn through some greater or lesser degree, but actually it's a lesser degree that's being reflected in sales results. How to really be curious, how to really, you talked about critical thinking before, develop critical thinking skills, so that, the buyer doesn't need more skills from you. They need more insights. They need better questions, because your job is to help them think more deeply and broadly about the challenges they face and the outcomes potentially they can achieve. That's the only reason they're talking to you. If you can't fill that role as a human being, hey, just go to your website.
Yeah, that's exactly. I was just going to say the same thing. They could just go to the website and read.
We don't train that part by and large. Yeah, it gets lip service and so on. But this is, the challenger sale they talked about. 53% of the buyer's decision is based on their experience with the human seller.
Mm-hmm.
And there's other research, recently coming out at
the reasons why people buy have very little to do with the product and the pricing and the functionality, because especially in the software world, everybody's got the same shit. Right?
Exactly.
So in that case, what's the difference? Well, it's the human. So I think this, using a tool like Bongo,
Mm-hmm.
companies want to use it correctly is help people practice on the things that actually do make a difference. Product knowledge doesn't make a difference because it's out there. What makes a difference is, are you building its credibility and trust? Are you asking the right questions? You know the right questions to ask. Can you think on your feet to be able to ask more complex questions? Do you have the emotional intelligence to navigate the ambiguity that exists in every sales situation?
Exactly. And, I couldn't agree more with everything you just said. And, I would argue one more of in my opinion, the reason that type of training hasn't been done is there haven't been tools to facilitate it, right? It's a lot easier to push knowledge out or push training out through a video and then measure, did that person watch that video? Did they, can they fill out this multiple choice question set of different features and functions? It's a lot harder, especially without more modern tools like Bongo, to be able to evaluate, can this person or this professional actually articulate why those features were built? Not just what are the features, but like, why do they even matter to the buyer? And that's something, that we really, train on during onboarding at Bongo. Not onboarding for Bongo employees, but like onboarding for our customers, right? And having them be challenged that like, hey, with this tool, you can completely rethink how you, evaluate or do validation here. And again, that just kind of like paradigm shift is really opens a lot of new doors for organizations.
Yeah, and I would really like to see an organization, let's say, use it in the hiring process, because I could see, I want to test. I wanted to test specific skills if they're important to the job, and some are just pure knowledge based, but obviously in sales, a lot of it's communications based. I could see using this to, ask certain questions of people. Ask them to do a pitch, but how might they answer this objection? How they answer this question? Create a scenario, and what you could do with the feedback then is give them coaching and ask them to do it again and see if they took the coaching. Because, gosh, high on the list of things I want some people I hire is, are they coachable? Right?
Totally. Yeah.
And absolutely being used in that regard. Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah. No, it's been an awesome journey at Bongo, and it's kind of just continuing to just be still at its infancy, but like I said, now having gone, so I've been with the company for a little over 10 years, and certainly this the category of sales enablement and customer success and just really customer facing roles like that's our core use case and bread and butter. But that's the thing that I've really been amazed by is like how our users end up ultimately using the product.
Right.
And it's it just takes a life of its own. And that's been a really cool observation from my perspective is it's not just an elevator pitch, and it's not just overcoming objections. It's being able to, like you were just articulating, or your example of, is this person coachable, right? So through a handful of questions, it's probably pretty straightforward, or it'll be quite obvious when you throw 15 people at it, who is a little more coachable, who's willing to listen, who, asks a question. Like a Bongo prompt might even be something like, hey, given this, here's a scenario XYZ, the buyer is throwing up this objection. What question would you ask to overcome that objection? So not what statement do you throw at them?
Oh, absolutely.
But how do you reframe their perspective and get them, thinking a different way? Yeah, that's like a really cool use case that we've seen, in the product or happening with our product that I personally wouldn't have thought about.
Yeah, no, this idea of forcing people to think and, as you said, ask a question, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so valuable. I mean, I just had on my show, actually by the time this episode will have aired, a professor from Cal State Fullerton, Ryan.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Written a couple of really interesting books. The most recent one called The Elevated Leader, but talks about how in developing people, and he was using leadership, for instance, but it doesn't specifically be leadership because it applies to sales, is we're focused on horizontal development, skills based, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to teach you more of these specific skills. But to my point before is at some point, it's just water overflowing the cup. But he talks about vertical development, which is help people develop a sort of cognitive and emotional sophistication to deal with more complex scenarios. And yeah, we need more of that in sales as well. So this sounds like could be interesting for that. All right. Well, Josh, we are coming to the end of the time. If people want to connect with you, learn more about Bongo, where should they go?
I would have them, hit me up on LinkedIn. So I'd love to start a conversation or share more about Bongo through LinkedIn, whether it's Bongo Learns, company page or just my personal page. That would be the probably fastest path towards reaching me directly. Otherwise, you can always go to bongolearn.com or go.bongolearn.com for more information on the product.
I just have to ask. It just occurred to me. Where's the name come from?
So, really we, if anybody has come up with a name for a company, it's actually really a lot harder than you think. To find something that's uniquely available and, especially in a specific space or industry that our organization can own. So we actually evolved through a few different names. And I think I mentioned earlier, but I was actually the first employee, not the founder of Bongo. So it was founded by a tenured professor. And originally he wanted us to go after just the education market. So, lo and behold, as things evolved, there's, a much deeper use case in the corporate learning space and sales enablement space. So, but really the original name was more education focused, and Bongo was a name that was both available and that we could kind of attach our wagon to and own, but also we can do a lot with, kind of beat to your own drum.
Right.
And, there's a lot of like kind of cute marketing stuff, if you will, that you can do with Bongo. And another big thing is it's universally like it translates really well, right? So especially as we expanded internationally a few years ago, that was another big criteria that ruled out a lot of other names that we were considering.
All right, fine. I had to ask. So anyway, all right, Josh, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Andy.
Okay, friends, that's it for this episode. First of all, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. I'm so grateful for your support of the show. And I want to thank our guest, Josh Kamrath, for sharing his insights with us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to this podcast, Sales Enablement with Andy Paul, on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. So thank you for your help with that, and thank you so much for investing your time with me today. Until next time, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.